Chairman, you can begin.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all those attending the RTA's virtual meeting of the Board of Directors. The Governor's emergency declaration remains in force, and pursuant to his executive orders declaring a public health emergency and amendments to the Open Meetings Act, we are operating under the permission to conduct our meeting without physical attendance requirements today. Let's review the guidelines for our meeting. Keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize background noise, which could impair the recording of today's meeting. When you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand. The board secretary will call on the board members who have raised their hands one at a time. When he calls on you, lower your hand and unmute before you speak. And when we get to voting, please raise your hand to make a motion or second. The board secretary will identify who is making the motion and the second for the record. And after the motion and second, lower your hands, please. Any questions at this time? With that said, seeing none, I will now call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance, which is our norm. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Indulcio.
Here.
Director Carey.
Here.
Director Colson.
Here.
Director Fuentes.
Here.
Director Gavin.
Here.
Director Gorman.
Here.
Director Groven.
Here.
Director Holt.
Here.
Director Kotal.
Here.
Director Lewis. Director Melvin.
Here.
Director Pang. Director Ross.
Here.
Director Sager. Chairman Dillard.
Present.
12 present and 3 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and we have a quorum. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the board meeting held on February 16th of 2023. Any comments or corrections to these minutes? If not, how about a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted?
A motion by Director Kotal, a second by Director Groven.
I see Director Groven. The new feature, I can actually see your little yellow hand when you raise in your pictures here. Upgrades to the system are good. Thank you for the motion and the second. With that, Mr. Secretary, please take a roll call.
Director Indulcio.
Yes.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Kotal.
Aye.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Ross.
Aye.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
12 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Item 4 is the public comments section of the meeting. Any comments received will now be read into the record by the board secretary. Jeremy, are there any members of the public wishing to be heard this morning?
We've received no comments at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5, which is the Executive Director Leanne Redden's report. Good morning, Leanne.
If I unmute before I start trying to talk. But good morning, everybody, and welcome this morning. And any guests that we have joining, welcome also. We've got a pretty brief agenda, so I'm going to be brief as well. Pleased to see that many of you and many of our transit colleagues were able to join us for this Chairman's City Club speech a couple of weeks ago. It was really gratifying, I think, to hear the positive feedback on the plan from our colleagues at the city and the service boards. And if you did miss the speech, you can view it on our website. There's a link available there so you can actually sort of see the presentation the chairman made on the plan. We also had the opportunity to present the plan at the March 9 meeting of CMAP's MPO Policy Committee. This committee is made up of transportation agencies and implementers from across the city and the region, and will be our body who ultimately has to vote on CMAT's plan of action for public transit. Our presentation was part of a larger discussion about the funding situation, funding options to support transit operations once the COVID relief dollars run out at the end of 2025. Our hope with Transit is the Answer was that it would spark these very type of conversations that are centered on the value that transit brings to our region and our riders. So we've been really gratified to see that our message, that our funding structure is, as I think you guys all know, too reliant on fares and must fundamentally be changed, and that was really understood and resonated with many. Earlier this week, the chairman and I joined the service boards and other advocates and stakeholders to testify at the Illinois Senate's Joint Transportation and Public Safety Infrastructure Appropriations Committee hearing. Here too, we brought our unified message that our current funding structure is too reliant on fares and the need to work together with the legislature to increase public funding so that we can achieve the transit system envisioned in Transit is the Answer. Similarly, on March 2nd, the RTA participated in a Transportation for Illinois coalition briefing that involved representatives from 8 Illinois congressional offices on the RTA's region's transit operating and capital funding needs. And these opportunities collectively to bring our plan and our message to stakeholders and decision makers is really just the beginning of our ongoing and further implementation efforts. Internally, we continue to plug key staff in to support that implementation and the scope of projects. In April, we will be bringing back to you all a much more thorough update on the actual implementation of Transit is the Answer. So next slide, please. All right, just want to make you quickly aware for you and your constituents and anyone who's listening to us live is that we will be having our call for projects for the Section 5310, which is the Enhanced Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disability program over the next week. And so just to clarify, I know there was a lot of numbers in there. Section 5310 represents the federal funding that the RTA has managed since 2012 as the region's designated recipient of those dollars. This call for projects is held every other year to solicit operating, capital, and mobility management project applications from across the region, with the hope of improving mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities by fundamentally removing barriers to transportation services and expanding transportation mobility options. We will be looking to award 2 years of funding for FY 2022 and 23, totaling just over $13.5 million. For the first time this year, applicants will be able to apply for funding using our online application on our website. So quicker, easier, more streamlined. And you will see information in our next regional transit update on our website and on our social channels. So next slide. As I noted, today's agenda is brief. We will have a report on the monthly financials. Next, we'll ask you for a vote on an amendment to the capital program, as well as approval on a consultant contract to support some station area planning. And then the board will vote to hold an executive session that we will plan to adjourn from there. So we won't be coming back to full open session. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report and happy to turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. We'll move on to item 6A, and that's a report on the monthly financial results for January. And Kevin, welcome again, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you. This report will be very short as well. So first slide, we're talking about the for information purposes only. We will present the financial results of the service board through January 2023. So this is a 1-month report, followed by a review of the monthly spreads of the adopted 2023 service board operating budgets. So the first thing we're going to look at is the operating deficit performance and the relief funding status update for our first month of the budget year. Next slide, please. The operating deficit results through January, again, 1 month only, were very favorable to budget for each service board and the region as a whole, continuing the trend that we saw throughout 2022. Each service board operating expenses were significantly lower than budgeted, resulting in a combined $24.3 million of favorable expense variance for January of 2023. Next slide, please. Our other routine update is the status of federal relief funding. Since last month, CTA requisitioned a little over $20 million in relief funding. And as a region, we have now drawn down 44.1% of, or 1.56 billion of the 3.5 billion total. We still anticipate that federal relief funding will begin to exhaust by the end of 2025. This will result in a projected annual budget gap of over $700 million beginning in 2026. If transit levels or service levels are to be maintained, we continue to repeat this message as we go. Ridership at that time is expected to have recovered to around 70% of pre-pandemic levels, and new funding sources will be needed to compensate for the resulting lower level fare of revenue. Next slide, please. As we have shared in the past, every month we select a focus area. For this month, our focus area, we're going to review some of the seasonality patterns within the operating budget. The monthly spread on this slide shows us how assumed ridership and in turn fare revenue is expected to vary as the year unfolds. Ridership is almost always lower in the winter months and builds through the summer due to the many special events in the city. Ridership in the city and the area. Ridership then declines over the last 2 months as the holidays and colder weather runs return. The overall system ridership assumption of 316 million rides is about 56% of pre-COVID levels. Next slide, please. This graph shows our expected sales tax receipts by month. Again, starting the year relatively low, and it's strengthening during the summer. One difference from the ridership slide is that December is by far our peak sales tax month due to the holiday shopping and all the economic activity. Next slide, please. Finally, an examination of the budgeted operating expenses by month reveals there's less month-to-month variation. We do see a little bit of higher expenses during the winter months compared to the summer months due to the allowances for snow and ice removal, for example, and also higher fuel consumption. But generally speaking, the service board's budgeted monthly expenses are around 280 million per month, with the number of days in the month causing some of the fluctuation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this was going to be a very short presentation, and this concludes my presentation. And back to you, Mr. Chairman and the board, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions from the board?
So Chairman, I don't see any questions at the moment. I think we're going to pause for a minute to fix a live streaming issue we currently have. So give us 1 moment.
Okay. While we're paused, I just want to point out from that chart and from that chart in our presentations and our committee testimony before the Senate, we are still moving and 1 million riders a day. I mean, that is a phenomenally large number of people. And while it would be nice to get back to the 2 million number, it is still 1 million people a day, pointing out the importance of mass transit to our Northeastern Illinois economy and way of life. If you think the expressways are crowded now, put those 1 million people out there on the road. Just for our IT folks, my screen does say we are live with a big red box. If that means anything to you. Or to WebEx.
If just to clarify, it is live, and so if people have logged in through the WebEx link, they can see the meeting and it is live, but we also stream via YouTube. And I believe that is the link that was that's the feed or the link that's not was having an issue.
I think we're ready to move forward now, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. And thanks to our IT folks for reconnecting us with YouTube. Item 7A is an amendment of the 2023 to 2027 capital program extensions to ICE-funded projects and approval of 2023 Federal Funding Allocation Agreements. And on this, we have Tara O'Malley and Brian Lowenberg who will present an amendment.
Good morning.
Morning.
Give me just a moment. Sorry, I had everything set up and then things went to sleep or moved around on me. Good morning. I am Tara O'Malley, Principal Analyst in our Capital Program Department here at the RTA. I'm here with my manager, Brian Lowenberg, to request your approval of 3 ordinances. First, an amendment to the 2023 to 2027 capital program. Second, extensions to ICE-funded projects. And finally, authorizations of federal funding allocation agreements for federal fiscal year 2023 with Northwest Indiana and Southeastern Wisconsin. Next slide, please. First, let's review the capital program amendment. The funding for the 2023 to 2027 capital program includes changes to the approved funding and projects for CTA and METRA. PACE is not amending their program at this time. The overall program is increasing by $635 million, which includes both new and reprogram funds. CTA's program is increasing by $493 million, and METRA's is increasing by $142 million. Details of all revenue and project changes can be found in the memo and Schedules 2A and 2B in your board packet. Today, we will discuss new funding that is being added to the program, looking at reprogramming actions that are included in the amendment, and share some projects that are being affected by this amendment. Next slide, please. The first quarter amendment, in this first quarter amendment, there are $118.5 million in new funding being added to the program. CTA is adding $118.48 million received as a part of an all stations accessibility federal discretionary grant. METRA is adding $20,000 in service board capital funds to fund vehicle maintenance projects. METRA also received the federal discretionary all stations accessibility grant and mega grants. These awards will be added to the program later this year. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at the All Stations Accessibility Program, or ASAP. CTA has been a leader in improving accessibility. CTA created its All Stations Accessibility Program to reach full accessibility of all elevated stations, or all L stations, subway included. In turn, the federal government created a federal discretionary program with the same name, aimed at helping systems nationwide reach full accessibility. For 2022, FTA issued a total of $686 million in all stations accessibility grants, of which the region received $185 million, or nearly 27% of all funds available. CTA received $118.5 million, or over 17% of the program. These funds are being added to the program today, while Metra's will be added in future amendments. CTA's award will fund improvements to 3 stations to make them ADA compliant. The stations include Belmont and Irving Park on Blue Line O'Hare branch, and the Pulaski Station on the Blue Line Forest Park branch. CTA is further reprogramming Rebuild Illinois bond funds, which will be discussed next, as a match to federal funds, which will ensure that these projects are fully funded. Now I'll turn it over briefly to my manager, Brian Lowenberg, to cover the reprogram funding actions. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tara. Another aspect of the capital amendments are reprogrammed funds, which are funds that were allocated in past capital programs, but that are being shifted to different projects. Service boards regularly reprogram funds during these amendments to match available funding to projects that are advancing, to projects that need a match, or to projects that have a new priority. In addition, reprogramming is used to address changes to the estimated cost of a project, which has become more important as the cost of projects are increasing. In this amendment, there are $516 million in reprogramming actions occurring. Of the reprogramming actions, $515 million are reprogramming of Rebuild Illinois bonds, and $1 million are reprogramming of CTA bonds. RTA encourages the service boards to actively reprogram funds to better match projects that are ready to proceed to help with the delivery of capital projects in a more timely manner. Next slide, please. As a reminder, one of the tenets of the performance-based programming approach that the board adopted in 2021 is to incentivize quicker completion of projects. To that end, we look at the percent of funds spent, with a goal of each service board spending at least 20% of available funds annually. The metric is built on a 3-year average. On the slide, we have the 3-year average percent of funds spent for 2019 through 2021. The calculation was used in the performance-based programming calculation for 2027 federal formula and PAYGO funds. You can see that all 3 service boards were below the 20% goal if we exclude debt service payments. For CTA, that's 19.5%, for Metra, 19.1%, and for PACE, 17.4%. By taking these actions to reprogram funds to projects that are advancing faster, the service boards will be able to improve these measures and deliver shovel-ready projects to the region sooner. We will be sharing with the board the updated figures that include 2022 expenditures later in the year once final calculations are complete. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at some of the projects that are being funded as part of this reprogramming. First, we'd like to highlight CTA's new training and control center. Additional Rebuild Illinois bond funds are being programmed to the project so that CTA does not need to rely on CTA-issued bonds to construct the facility. The new center will be located in West Garfield Park neighborhood as part of the city's Invest Southwest plan. The facility will house both the 24/7 control center, which oversees buses, trains, and power to the system, as well as a new training center for operation, maintenance, and customer-facing personnel. Next slide, please. Now let's look at the Forest Park reconstruction project. CTA is reprogramming Rebuild Illinois funds to fully fund Phase 1 of the Forest Park reconstruction. The reconstruction is a regionally important project that helps to address slow zones and adds accessibility. Phase 1 work includes an upgraded Racine station with full ADA accessibility, reconstructed track from UIC Halstead to Illinois Medical District, and a new and upgraded substation to provide additional power along the Blue Line. These projects have already completed the design stage and are moving to the construction stage this year. Based on the bids coming in, CTA realized that the projects would be more expensive than originally planned, necessitating the reprogramming of funds. CTA continues to plan additional phases of this reconstruction. Next slide, please. Now let's look at a few Metra projects. Metra is reprogramming Rebuild Illinois bond funds to fully fund reconstruction of 3 stations along the Metra electric line. This includes 79th Street Chatham, 87th Street Woodruff, and 103rd Street Rosemore. A contract for this work has already been awarded, and construction is expected to begin this year. Work at the stations includes new ADA accessible entrances with elevators to the platform, full platform reconstruction, and stair replacement. Metra has put a significant emphasis on upgrading stations along the Metra electric line, which is one of the major routes in the Faircook South Transit pilot program. Metra is expecting a total of 13 stations along the line to be rehabbed in the coming years. Next slide, please. Finally, let's look at Metra's ticket vending machine project. Metra is adding additional Rebuild Illinois dollars to fully fund the purchase of ticket vending machines system-wide. This will meet Metra's goal of removing cash collection from trains, as well as providing greater convenience to customers and allow Metra more flexibility to offer promotional fares. Metra is expecting to begin receiving these ticket vending machines this year, and system rollout will continue over the next several years. Next slide, please. Our next requested action is for one-year extensions for the project completion timeline of 5 projects funded by the Innovation, Coordination, and Enhancement, or ICE program. This includes CTA's Ventura Improvement Project and Metra's projects at Blue Island for hybrid vehicles, terminal information displays, and GPS train tracking. Full project details can be found in the board memo. Now I'll turn it back to Tara to close out the presentation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Brian. The final request is to approve the allocation of federal funds between RTA and Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, or NRPC, and between RTA and Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, or SURPEC, for the federal fiscal year 2023. The splits are based on the agreement reached in 2022 and follow the same formulas. NRPC and SURPEC have reviewed and accepted the proposed splits for federal fiscal year 2023. Note, we will include these adjustments to the service board allocations and capital projects in the June capital amendment. Next slide, please. Staff is requesting adoption of the following ordinances. Approval of the amendment to the 2023 to 2027 capital program, approval of one-year extensions to 5 ICE funded projects, and the approval to execute the LOUs with NRPC and SURPEC for 2023 federal apportionments. Brian and I are happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we are seeking your approval for these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Tara or Brian?
See no hands at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
All right. If not, we'll need a motion and a second to approve these.
Motion by Director Gathing and a second by
Director Melvin.
there we go, by Director Melvin.
Thank you, Chris. With that, Mr. Larsh, please take a roll call.
Sure. Director Indalcio?
Aye.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Gathing?
Aye.
Director Gorman?
Aye.
Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Holt?
Aye.
Director Kotel?
Aye.
Director Lewis? Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Pang? Director Ross?
Aye.
Chairman Dillard?
Yes, and just one comment on the reports, and I want to thank Senator Duckworth. Of all the leaders in Washington with respect to accessibility, Tammy is really the nation's leader. And it's interesting. I just saw a report that talked about the difficulty of Chicago and New York because our stations are often either elevated, no pun intended for the L, or lowered, especially in New York, making accessibility and ADA compliance more difficult than many of the new systems throughout the United States. So I applaud the CTA for taking on these projects, Metra, and eventually PACE. And it's great that we are catching up belatedly with ADA compliance for people with disabilities to use our systems and to improve their lives. So that I want to give a special shout out to Senator Duckworth, who is really the nation's leader on this particular issue, and proudly she's from Illinois. All right, moving along. I think we can address the following agenda items at the same time as they appear on the board agenda. The items for consideration include item 7B, which is an ordinance authorizing a contract for the Richmond Park Transit-oriented Development Plan. 7C are our approval of travel expenses. Joe Leary for question on the Richmond Park TOD plan. Any questions on that? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the item 7B and 7C in a second.
Motion by Director Indalcio, second by Director Cotel, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And with that, Jeremy, please take the roll.
Sure. Director Indalcio.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gadding.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Yes.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Ross.
Yes.
Chairman Dillon.
Yes.
13 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you all. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before the board today? On an unusually short meeting? Seeing none, I want to remind everybody that the next meeting is April 20th, 2023 at 9 a.m. You all have your taxes done by then. And before we adjourn, Nadine, I know we are going to go into executive session. Madam Counsel, will you please read the exception to move us into executive session?
Yes, Chairman. Pursuant to subsections 2C8 and 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act, if the board wishes to move into and adjourn from executive session, the board must vote to do so at this time.
Great. So let's, my suggestion is that if there's no further business to come before the public section of the board of directors, I'll entertain a motion in a second to adjourn into executive session, and then we will adjourn the full meeting at that time as well. We will not have to return here. There's no further public business to come before the board, but let's have a motion in a second to go into executive session, and then we will be done with the public meeting at that time too.
Motion by Director Ross and second by Director Carey, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, take a roll call, Mr. Secretary, on this.
Yep. Director Indalcio.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gadding.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Melvin.
Yes.
Director Ross.
Yes.
Chairman Dillon.
Yes.
13 ayes,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
and that motion is approved. Want to remind everybody again, we will get off of this platform and please reboot yourselves in the Teams platform for our executive session. Thank you to all of you for your attendance. Thank you to the public who is listening for having an interest in mass transit, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.